So what is it that we learned from yesterday about general defenses, general exceptions?
That it is applicable to every country and
Every,
worldwide, actually.
every,
Every
every,
country, every
every,
case, every situation.
every section. It applies. The exceptions included here apply are to be read as part of every section. That's one. Secondly, there are two kinds of exceptions we have created here. One we call that you are excused from the criminal liability because if the action is done in the circumstances, and the second one was justifiable. The excuse category, the first of all we looked at was act which has been done by a person. Either that person is bound by law to do it, or due to mistake of fact, believes himself to be bound by law. So if you are the police officer, you have the duty to arrest a person on a warrant. You do it, you arrest a wrong person by mistake, you are protected, no liability. You cannot be held for illegal confinement of a person. It has to be done in good faith. That's the first one. Second one, if the judge is acting judicially, so if he is acting judicially in the exercise of power, which is or which in good faith he believes to be given by him to law. So there are cases where the judges were not informed about the correct law, and they sent somebody to prison. And there was a child who could not be sent to prison, but nobody brought evidence, neither the child nor anybody brought it onto the record that the accused person was a child and therefore could not be sent to jail. So it's a mistake of fact. It's a act done judicially, and therefore there any harm which has been caused by that. Nothing is an offense done by a judge when acting judicially in the sense of powers, which is or which in good faith he believes to be. So in good faith he believes that he has the power to send this accused person. Nobody brought it to his knowledge that it was a child, and especially when it's borderline cases, the judges cannot look at the person and say. So that's the kind of example. Then we have 78, act done pursuant to the judgment or order of the court. So certainly when the hangman hangs, he is acting in pursuant of the court order of hanging. Therefore, even though with the intention to kills the person he hangs, it is not an offense. 79, act done by a person justified or by mistake of fact believing himself justified by law. Nothing is an offense which is done by a person who is justified by law, or who by reason of mistake of fact and not by reason of mistake of law in good faith believes himself to be justified by law in doing so. Illustration, Z commits, A sees Z commit what appears to be a murder. A, in the exercise to the best of his judgment, exerted in good faith of the power which the law gives to all persons of apprehending murderers in the fact, seizes Z in order to bring Z before the proper authorities. A has committed no offense, though it may have been that Z was acting in self-defense. Suppose, has one of you, any one of you, lost your house keys, and then you entered your house through a through a window, or you kind of pried open something, and at night your neighbors saw you doing that, not realizing that it is you. They fire at you in order to protect your property. You get injured. Not an offense because this person thought he was acting in good faith in order to protect your property. And law does justify that. The If it is accident in doing a lawful act, so you are driving a vehicle and accident happens, no liability. With your driving with proper care and caution. So if you are doing something lawfully, but accidentally some harm is caused to some person while you are acting in a lawful manner using lawful means. Suppose your car has been stolen and the thief is driving the car with proper care and caution, but he accidentally runs over somebody. Will he be entitled to this defense under Section 80?
No, ma'am.
Why not? Why not?
Driving a vehicle of theft is not a lawful act.
Good. So that you have to be very clear on what is the reasoning for saying so. You're giving your answer that it is not liable is not enough. You must always provide the reason why you say so. So in this case, driving the vehicle after stealing it is not a lawful act. Doing a lawful act in a lawful manner by lawful means. All the three are required. So it's not satisfied. Illustration: person is working with a hatchet, the head flies off, kills a man who is standing by. Here, there was no want of proper caution on part of A. So he did not know that it was loose. It had just become loose while he was working. And therefore, this is a pure accident. He's not liable, even though somebody has died. In one of the cases, one of the sessions I had with the judges, they said in case of 304A, the question was whether a person who has been charged with 304A can be released on bail. And the argument was, oh, somebody has died, how can you release that person on bail? I said, no, there might be any reason. A person is died in an accident also. So in accident case, there's no liability whatsoever. So which was yours? Because somebody has died, therefore that will be our reason for denying bail. So certainly, merely because there is a serious consequence to the victim is not the criteria. The criteria to determine liability is whether any section is attracted either in terms of criminal liability or exemption from criminal liability. Then section 81 is talking about necessity. The defense of necessity is known when the act is likely to cause harm, but it has been done without criminal intent, but in order to prevent a greater harm. So without negligence on your part, you are driving a vehicle, and then suddenly you find that a lot of school children are running from this side to the other. And you must turn your vehicle to the left, but there is a person on the left also. If you did not do anything, many children will come under your wheel, but this other person, you know this person is going to get injured, but this is one person which will get injured compared to many who were on the other side. If you do that without criminal intent, you are protected in that case. We have this very interesting case study there, Parker. So Parker was a young lad of 15 years, and he and along with some other people had been stranded on the sea. Their shipwreck was there, and they were on a lifeboat. They were already on the high seas for 17, 18 days. They were starving, they were thirsty. So the other 4 people decided to kill Parker and eat his flesh in order to survive. If they had not done so, all of them would have perished. So they killed Parker and survived on his flesh. By the time they were rescued, then they were rescued, I think, second or third day after that. And it was turned out that they had killed Parker in order to save their own lives. You think they will be entitled to Section 81?
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody who differs? Why do you say they will be entitled to Diwakar?
And because ma'am, they are acting in good faith for the protecting of the life of the other 3 or 4.
What would good
Ma'am,
faith? Deepika
ma'am,
says
they
no.
killed,
Why,
ma'am, they
Deepika? Why
killed,
do you say? Yes, Saurabh?
ma'am, they killed Parker to save their own life. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that if I can save my life by killing other, then it's justified.
Okay. Deepika, what did you say? They are killing a human. And in this case, they never consulted Parker. So their act was not actually in good faith. They had not allowed him to be a party to the whole conversation. So they were converted. Of course, they were later on, clemency was given. They were presidential pardon was given to them. But when it came to, because it says without criminal intent. So the fact that it was militia, they're not even talking to the person who is involved into the decision making. So those, there are lots of ways in which one can analyze, and I think in your jurisprudence class, maybe at some stage, we'll do this philosophical analysis of this case. But certainly what we are saying is nothing is an offense. And remember, these are all categories. When it says nothing is an offense, whatever is the harm, it is not an offense. All these are absolute defenses against any criminal liability. In under 300 exceptions, it was not liability of murder, but liability of culpable homicide. But the defenses given in the exception, general exception, chapter 4, absolve you from complete criminal liability. No necessities that justifies homicide. It's all a question. Let's see whether we have any illustration to this section. We have. Let's read the illustration. A, the captain of a stream vessel, suddenly and without any fault or negligence on his part, finds himself in such a position that before he can stop the vessel, he must inevitably run down a boat B with 20 or 30 passengers on board, unless he changes the course of his vessel, and that by changing his course, he must incur risk of running down a boat C with only 2 passengers on board, which he may possibly clear. Here, if A alters the course without any intention to run down the boat C, and in good faith for the purpose of avoiding the danger to the passengers in the boat B, he is not guilty of an offense, though he may run down the boat C by doing an act which he knew was likely to cause that effect, if it be found as a matter of fact that the danger which he intended to avoid was such as to excuse him in incurring the risk of running down the boat C. Illustration B, A, in a great fire, pulls down houses in order to prevent the conflagration from spreading. He does this with the intention and good faith of saving human life or property. Here, if it be found that the harm to be prevented was of such a nature and so imminent as to excuse A's act, he is not guilty of the offense. We've seen this, when fire happens in one house, adjoining house, and it is kind of big fire, 5 houses have been engulfed, they might bring down the 6th house so that there is a gap and it does not go to the 7th house. So there would be situations where, and certainly the point you are making, that this is saving yourself at the cost of somebody else. So while the illustrations are talking about that you are not trying to save yourself, you are trying to save this group of people vis-a-vis this group of people. So this group of people, in the example illustration A, we have that even if these 2 were to drown, if their boat capsizes, then the possibility of rescuing 2 is much easier. There's a possibility. Maybe they won't succeed. Maybe they would succeed. But the effort has been done in order to protect these 20 people on one side and 2 on the other side. So that's where what we call as the defense of necessity. Necessity which has not been caused by your action, by your negligence, and you do not have any criminal intent to cause the harm to the other.
Ma'am, but if they would not have killed that person, they all would have died. So
yeah, but why kill Parker? Why not the eldest person? Why Parker?
Ma'am, that's a different story than one person.
No, they have acted clearly in criminal intent when they were trying to save themselves. Suppose somebody puts a gun on your head and says, unless you kill C, I'm going to kill you. So A has put a gun on your head saying, kill C, otherwise I'll kill you. You kill C. You do not have the defense. You could have killed A and you would have been absolved. But killing C to save yourself by killing him is not justifiable. So you can harm the aggressor. In case of private defense, if it is a private defense that you want to save your property, one, Parker is not posing the danger. So Parker is nowhere the aggressor for you to exercise that right. If it's a necessity, then necessity, if it was perhaps the judges would have said differently if they had at least consulted Parker. Parker said, okay, fine, I'm the youngest. But the other argument can be that maybe the older should have been killed because younger people have got longer life to live. So because the younger one is feeble, and there are lots of factors that know who was the most ill at that point of time, most diminished in their physical power. So lots of factors are there, but certainly the fact that there was no consultation with this other person who was
Now,
who
do you
the
think that
others
if
who decided to
poll
kill.
was created, now if they did a poll that who should be killed, then anyone would have agreed that yeah, that is the right way. No one would
If
have
that was
agreed to.
then no, if that was then they should have all died. How can anyone decide that the other should die because I want to live? If nobody agreed, or everybody dies. The moment you decide I will kill him in order to save myself, that's a criminal intent. So section 82 and 83, we call these are the defenses of based on mental capacity. Actually, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86 are all talking about the capacity of the mind to decide. In 82 and 83, this is incapacity of the mind or immaturity of the mind due to age. So any child committing any offense, nothing is an offense which is done by a child under 7 years of age. So if a child has been seeing all these movies and all these cartoons, and he picks up his father's gun and says, shush, 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 tuck, 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 tuck. He not realizing, he kind of knows that people die. He just know that. But he doesn't really understand the concept. The law says whether you are not below 7, it is irrebuttable. Nothing is an offense. In case of 83, it is above 7 up to the age of 12 years. Law presumes that the child has mental maturity to know what they're doing, but it can be rebutted. This first one, 82, is called as a child is doli incapex. Let me write this. So the child is presumed conclusively not to have the mental maturity to have mens rea, any mens rea. And therefore, any action by a child below 7 years of age is not an offense. There has been always this technical question and we haven't any answer. So it says who is under 7 years of age. So today I am 7. I'm not under 7, I'm 7. And 83 says above 7. So if the offense happens on the date of the birthday, which section will apply? And my sense is that if you're not above 7, you are under 7. Because on the date of 7, you are still 7. So therefore, as long as you're not above 7, 83 doesn't apply, 82 only applies. But these are the kind of technical questions lawyers ask and judges have to determine. In another legislation, we had a section which says the definition of child was a child who has not attained the age of 18 years. So what does attain means? Does it mean entering 18th or does it mean completing 18? So this is the fodder for lawyers' lives and profession. So certainly in this one, we do have these two expressions, under 7 and above 7. What is the status? If you are 7, it's not there. There's also this whole question that when we're talking about age, is it the physical age or is it the mental age that we're talking about? And we have had a case of a victim. She was about 28 years old physically, biologically, but her mental age was a child of 8 years. She was raped. So the mother did approach the Supreme Court saying that she should be given, in her case, POCSO should apply, Protection of Children Against Sexual Offences Act should apply, because her mental age is 8 years, and that legislation applies to children till the age of 18. The court did not grant that in her case. The child has in any case died by that before the case was disposed of. But that is another aspect that when talking about age, is it the biological age? Generally speaking, yes, but there has been cases where it has been questioned that it should not be the biological age, but the mental age of the child. Because when it's a mens rea, mens rea is not connected with the physical age, it is connected with the mental maturity of the person. So that's another angle. 82 and 80, so 83 says if you are above the age of 7, but below the age of 12, it is assumed that you are doli capex. but it is a rebuttable presumption. In the age of science, isn't it contrary to our understanding that whereas one hand we define mental age and on another hand we have 7 years as age of attain menstruia?
Ma'am,
You cross 7 at 12 midnight, isn't it? Yes, who's asking?
ma'am, I
Yeah,
have a
sure.
doubt.
Yeah,
Ma'am,
sure.
how do we see mental maturity? Because we've seen in cases of prohibition of child marriage, and we've seen courts validating Muslim marriages under the age of 18, say 17 also. Ma'am, how do we see that the person is mature or not? Because as per Muslim personal law, we see that as soon as the girl or the boy attains puberty, he or she can get married. But
Mhm.
it's like frustrating the purpose of prohibition of child marriage act then,
No,
ma'am.
but the other way around also. When you look at juvenile justice till year 2000, from 1960 to year 2000, we had the definition which says child is a person below the age of 16 years in case of boys and below the age of 18 years in case of girls. And it said the higher age is required for girls because they need protection till a longer age. So that meant that for all purposes, girls till the age of 18 could not take decisions for themselves, while boys at the age of 16 could do that. On the other hand, look at the Marriage Act, which says 18 for girls, 21 for boys. And we asked our students, why is it so? He says, no, no, the boys mature later. So for juvenile justice, they mature early. For marriage, they mature later on. Then there's a question of that, biologically, women are ready for reproduction at the age of 18. Boys are also ready for reproduction at that age. So somewhere there are lots of things that are happening. So the whole question boils down to one, certainly when you had your 18th birthday, you became capable of voting for the country. Did suddenly वो जैसे ना ज्ञान प्राप्त होता था, हमारे कहानियां बहुत सारी कि बुद्ध महात्मा बुद्ध एंड महावीर जी किसी पेड़ के नीचे बैठी थे, अचानक से उनको रात को ज्ञान प्राप्त हो गया, दिन में रात ज्ञान प्राप्त हो गया. ऐसा तो नहीं होता हमारे साथ. But legal status changes overnight. It is not that I suddenly acquire all powers. I can enter a contract. I'm declared as an adult overnight. Yesterday I was a child. Today I've become an adult, responsible for everything I do. I'm completely responsible for my criminal act. I'm completely capable of entering into a contract. So, lot of abilities. I can drive a vehicle now that I'm 18. I wasn't yesterday. I could not do it, but today I can do lawfully. So legally speaking, lots of things change. Your rights, obligations, duties, everything changes overnight. What about the cutoff? In actual life, there is no demarcation from yesterday to I'm every single day, especially when you are children and you're growing up, you are in the phase of growing capacities. Every single day, when you see a small child, day one he talks mama, then 10 days later says papa, then he says chacha, then he says bua. So every day he's increasing his capacities. Then he starts recognizing, then he starts walking. First 3 legs, 2 legs, whatever. There are all these processes which are continuous processes. So now with the law, the whole question is how do you determine? So there are two choices. When so individual cases, you will have an assessment done by somebody. They will give, and in individual cases, you will assess. The other one is that you lay down a cutoff. And sometimes they are scientific cutoff, sometimes they have been just out of the head. So there is arbitrariness in all cutoffs. There's no two views about it. Because a day before, all incapacities existed. A day later, they have all been removed. Which is not is happening in real life. Nothing changes overnight. But in law, everything changes. So therefore, people who are on the borderline are it's very difficult to decide. No, the whole Nirbhaya controversy was on this only. The law said a child below the age of 18, he was 4 months less. The other Mercedes run and hit case, he was 4 days less than 18. So there was a whole halabaloo that these are arbitrary. Surely they're arbitrary. But if you do not, those are the other category of arbitraries which will happen, which is now happening for children between the age of 16 to 18. Because in 16 to 18, we have said, if they commit a serious offense, a heinous offense, there's a category of heinous offenses. If they commit any of those offenses, then they can be tried as an adult. So now every single case assessment has to be done. And assessment is usually saying he's not insane, he's not acted anything differently, he is not, no, there was nothing extraordinary about that child. But that is what adolescence is about. Adolescence is about having thrills and seeking thrills and not paying attention to the consequences. That is how adolescence is. We have all gone through that. And because of that, sometimes the judges agree with it and say, no, no, there was nothing extraordinary. He was like a normal adolescent, which are driven by their impulses. Sometimes they say, no, 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 there was nothing wrong. He was not mentally ill. He didn't have a fit of anger, or he didn't have any fit of insanity. And therefore, he should be tried as an adult. So now we are giving a lot more discretion to the judges by taking this approach. So tomorrow you will have another case which will be 4 days less than 16. You will again have the same issue which happened in Nirbhaya. Only 4 days less, only 4 months less, only 2 months less, one. And we will see it in a case of kidnapping. The girl was 17 years, 10 months. And she ran away from home, went with her boyfriend. Whole question. She's on the verge of majority. So after 18, nobody could have been prosecuted. But because she was 17 years, 10 months, prosecution did happen. Acquittal happened is a different question. So certainly, when the legislature chooses a date, a cutoff age, there will be arbitrariness on borderline cases. But it is assumed, and we are now party to, we have signed Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is a convention signed by every single country in the world, ratified by everybody excepting USA. So that is defining child as a person below the age of 18. So that is the universally accepted definition. When you have a lot of countries, so that is one is the definition of child. The other is the mental maturity. England gave us the 7 years in 1860. In their own country, they said 10 years was the minimum age of responsibility, while they fixed up 7 for us, saying Indian children are much smarter than the English children were. So arbitrariness writ large on that argument. And also from 10 to 14 years, I forget, not 10 or 12, I think 10 to 12 years, they said still doli incapex, but it can be rebutted to say, no, this particular child had maturity. Later on, they did away with the minimum age of responsibility because of certain other developments. But a lot of countries in Scotland, till the age of 16, there is no criminal liability whatsoever, criminal liability. They will be processed, but by the child welfare boards. So different countries, and India is criticized for having a very low age of criminal responsibility from the age of 7. But we have still not changed that law. But the harshness of this law has been mitigated by the Juvenile Justice Act, which says that till the age of 18, children cannot be prosecuted in the same manner. Some action will follow. The action will be geared toward reformation, rehabilitation, not for punishing them. So that's the basic approach, exceptions being 16 to 18 heinous offenses. And we might come to that again at some stage. So the general scheme is that these ages, and so therefore this whole question was that if a child commits an offense under the age of 6, in Juvenile Justice Act, we have got 2 bodies, 2 categories of children. One we call as child in conflict with law, CCL, and the other category which is CNCP, children in need of care and protection. So a child committing an offense, suppose a murder, 6-year-old commits a murder, that child will be treated as CNCP. So some proceedings will continue, but all proceedings either below the age of 7 or above the age of 7 till the age of 18 are all geared toward not punishing, but reforming the child, treating the child, counseling the child. The child can be kept with the parents, even in case of murder. So all those possibilities are there. So therefore, the rigor of criminal law and the stigma of criminal law has also been taken away. So excepting for the heinous category of offenses, the child does not suffer any disqualification. They cannot say that because lots of government jobs are not available if you have been convicted for offenses punishable with 2 years. But children cannot be, this cannot be, if a child has committed murder as a child and has been sent to an institution, has been through the processes, etc., that will not come in the way of his employment with the government. And there are a lot of cases there where the police said, no, he was tried for a certain offense and therefore we will not take it. In all cases, the courts have said, no, there's a statutory protection to children in the Juvenile Justice Act itself. So certainly when it comes to 82, 83, these are little antiquated, but technically speaking, it still is that no criminal proceedings, and the Children Act proceedings are not known as criminal proceedings. These are known as inquiry. They are not trials. So the magistrate of the Juvenile Justice Board with two other social workers, that is what is called the Juvenile Justice Board, JJB. So JJB deals with all cases where a child has committed any offense. So first port of call in all those cases will be the inquiry before the JJB. If it is a child in need of care and protection, orphans, beggars, children victims of calamities, children who have been trafficked, children who are into sex work, the parents are exposing them to immoral things. There are a lot of categories are there. 10 or 12 categories are there in that legislation, because of which proceedings can again start, but all geared toward ensuring that the first family is supported to look after the children. If the family is not there or cannot support them, then state institutions are there to look after them. So this 82, 83 have to be then read along with the Juvenile Justice Act provisions, which are all geared toward no punishment under this legislation will apply to them, even when they are tried as an adult. Punishments are not under this section, under this IPC or special laws. All the orders which can be passed in case of children are given in the Juvenile Justice Act itself. So which is a standalone, complete legislation dealing with children committing offenses or children who are found to be in need of care and protection. Okay, 84, no. Yeah, 84, 85, 86 are dealing with, 84 is dealing with the defense of unsoundness of mind. So when we say unsoundness of mind, we have this term, we are aware of term schizophrenic. So somebody सड़क में देखता है वो पागल घूम रहा है, he has got torn clothes, हमें दिखने लगता है कि ये पागल है. So that's our normal understanding of mental illness. But mental illness is of a whole range, right from depression to schizophrenic to bipolar to fits of insanity. There are lots of categories of mental illness. But the mental illness which will absolve a person from criminal liability has to fulfill the criteria laid down in section 84, which says nothing is an offense which is done by a person who at the time of doing it by reason of unsoundness of mind is, so it may be a case of periodical insanity or fit of insanity. So it may be a permanent insanity, it may be a temporary one, but because of the unsoundness of mind at that point of time, that person is incapable of knowing the nature of the act, or that he is doing what is either wrong or contrary to law. So it is not sufficient that medically he has been declared to be a schizophrenic. So the example I was giving you the other day, that a mad person, in our understanding a mad person, he attacks, he throws stones at a bus, breaks the window panes, injures people, passengers on the bus, and then he runs away, hides himself. He's doing it as a part of unsoundness of mind, but he's aware that what he's doing, what is the reason why he's hiding, he knows that he's done something wrong. He will not get the exception. He will not get the benefit of exception. But if this person throws stones and he's laughing and he's kind of very happy, he thinks, this is a lot of fun. He does not know that this is wrong. This is contrary to law. It is an offense. If his faculty, mental faculty has been affected in that manner, that he cannot distinction between right and wrong, that it is illegal, that it is prohibited by law, it is an offense. If he does not have that kind of capacity, only then he gets the benefit. So if, so whether it's temporary or it's permanent, doesn't matter. But if at the time of doing it, this person did not have that capacity. So a lot of films show us this, this person is acting that he does not know what's happening, faking illness. So first of all, you will need to have a medical opinion, but merely medical opinion is not enough. The mental illness, so we say there's a difference between medical insanity and legal insanity. Medically, somebody may be declared as person of unsound mind, but for him or her to claim the benefit of this exception, this person should have unsoundness of a mind of such a nature. The unsoundness of mind should have affected his or her mental capacity in such a manner that this person is incapable of none of these, incapable of knowing the nature of the act, or that he's doing what is either wrong or contrary to law. So neither he knows whether throwing the stone is what are you doing. No, he might be throwing stone, he might be jumping into the water. He doesn't know whether jumping in the water he will survive, he will die. He throws the things into the thing, so he does not know what he's doing. But if suppose, so if a person attacks because of illness, he attacks everybody. Every moving thing he attacks. And so he's knowing that the moving things are there and he's causing injury. So somewhere he is, what you're trying to know, there's a distinction between mistake of fact and incapacity to know the nature of the act. So when a person is hitting everything which is moving under a mistake of fact that moving thing is a snake, then that's a mistake of fact, not insanity. But if due to unsoundness of mind, he starts, there might be cases of what we call as uncontrollable impulses. When you look at schizophrenic people, some of them get the desire to see blood. It's uncontrollable. Medically, it is recognized a condition where the person is incapable of controlling his or her impulses because of the illness. Even though there is a desire to see blood, this person knows it is still wrong. The benefit is not available. So it may seem like a little hard that this person is not capable of controlling his impulse, but criminal liability still accrues to such person. So even if there is an irrepressible impulse because of the illness, but the person still knows that what he's doing is, he knows the nature of the act, what he's doing, he's eating, he's playing, he's running, or he knows that it is wrong, or he knows that it is contrary to law. In any of these scenarios, he or she would still not be entitled to claim the exception of 84, which is unsoundness of mind. Then we have the question of people getting into that state because of intoxication. So if you get drunk in a party and then you misbehave with a woman, she says sexual assault, oh, I was inebriated. Not a defense. The defense of intoxication can be used only if first you were intoxicated against your wish or without your knowledge. So some party drug has been given to you. Now you have lost, you are not aware. It is not a voluntary drinking. If you do voluntary drinking, any amount of it, you are not entitled to defense of intoxication. So defense of intoxication is available first. You have been intoxicated without your knowledge or against your will. That's the last part. Or against his will. So then you got intoxicated. That is in itself, even if you have been intoxicated, that is not enough.
Ma'am, let's suppose that a person is intoxicated against his will, due to peer pressure and all that.
No, peer pressure is not against his will. Against his will is कि आपके हाथ में बांट दिया और आपके गले में नाक बंद करके आपके गले में डाल दी. There's no choice for you to swallow. The peer pressure में पढ़ते हो, that is voluntary because nobody was holding a gun on your head. So when you say against his knowledge, without his knowledge, आपके drink में मुझ मिला दिया, not knowledge. That is the knowledge part. Against your will, will has been very categorically understood in section 375 that the person was resisting, was under force, was under duress. Only then it is against your will, and you are resisting. So will is a very clear category. It's not कि उधर बाकी सब कहे तो मैंने पी ली. You take consequences if you do that. So what I'm saying is even when you have been intoxicated against your will or without your knowledge, but you still have the capacity to distinguish between right and wrong. How many times have you seen a drunk man misbehaving with his sister, sexually abusing his sister or mother? They still have the distinction. This is my mother, this is my sister, these women I cannot touch. But he'll go and abuse another woman. So he knows right and wrong. He knows the nature of the act. He cannot take the exception. So even if it is those cases where it was without the knowledge, it was against his wish, Even in those cases, as long as he knows, no, so let's read it fully. Nothing is an offense which is done by a person who, at time of doing it, by reason of intoxication, incapable of knowing the nature of the act, or that he's doing what is either wrong or contrary to law. So the state of mind should be the same as that mentioned insanity. That you do not know what you're doing. You will not be able to distinguish between your mother and your sister and the others. If you are able to, then you do not get the exception. Exception is only that you stop finding out who is who, what you are doing. So it's only those circumstances. So even in involuntary, even in forced intoxication, unless your state of mind has become like that of the legal insanity state of mind, you are not entitled to get the exception. Then 86 is saying that when an offense requires a particular intent or knowledge committed by one who is intoxicated, then what is the liability? In cases where an act done is not an offense unless done with a particular knowledge or intent, a person who does the act in a state of intoxication shall be liable to be dealt with as if he had the same knowledge as he would have had if he had not been intoxicated, unless the thing which intoxicated him was administered. So suppose, what is the section we can think of? We are talking about offenses on this knowledge or intent. So the intent to murder because of intoxication administered to you without your knowledge or against your will, you get enraged and then you fire at somebody. No? Because of intoxication, you got more enraged than you would have normally. So let's say grave and sudden provocation. Your grave and sudden provocation will be judged in the same manner as it would be if you were not intoxicated, if it was voluntary. If it was involuntary, then he would not have it if he had not been intoxicated, unless the thing which intoxicated was administered to him without the knowledge or against his will. So only in those cases, you can take the exception, but again, the intoxication still has to be of the same extent, which is mentioned in 85. So intoxication is, yes, actually, generally speaking, is not an exception available for voluntary drinking in any circumstance. It may become an exception only if intoxication has led to a state of mind where you cannot entertain intention, you cannot entertain mental knowledge, and it has been involuntary without your knowledge. Only in those cases, if the intoxication has led to completely destroying your faculties of the mental faculties to be able to distinguish between right and wrong, you are not entitled to. So 87, act not intended and not known to be likely to cause death or grievous hurt done by consent. So we have said this earlier on even in 300 exception 5, that nobody can give consent to causing death to myself. We have all signed papers now. Okay, when we get onto the, that will be a different section. When we play boxing matches, boxing, very categorically hitting each other, and the possibility of you breaking a bone, a tooth, or fracturing your cheekbone, etc., is all very much there. So when you do that, it is not likely to cause death or grievous hurt. It has been done by the consent. Both the boxers have agreed to the injuries which may occur. It will not lead to liability. Nothing in which is not intended to cause death or grievous hurt. Boxing is not intended to cause this. It may happen still. And which is not known by the doer to be likely to cause death or grievous hurt is an offense by reason of any harm which it may cause or be intended by doer or to cause to any person. The person should be above 18 years of age who has given consent, whether express or implied, to suffer that harm or by reason of any harm which it may be known by the doer to be likely to cause by any such person, to any such person, who has consented to take that risk. So when you entertain, you get into what is that sport known where people are fighting with these swords?
Fencing.
Fencing. So these are all categories which are not intended to cause death, but serious injuries may occur. Consent is there. The person's using those activities are.
Ma'am, like there have been cases like in the car racing, once the car like blasted around, entered into the public barricade and then blasted and all, killing few people. And then there was a match, a cricket match, and the ball hit someone's head and he died. And the excuse that they took was it was voluntary non-fit injury, that they have voluntarily agreed to it. Have they
So that
really
is what is
voluntarily
meant
agreed
by
that the car
implied. That is what is meant by implied consent. When you go to see the cricket match, you have impliedly consented that if you get hit by a ball, it is your problem. So, and the person who had no intention, who had there's a knowledge is likely to, but that's not what is intended. So it may be one freak chance. So when people doing car racing, for example, they can get injured themselves, they can injure somebody else. When any of that happens, this section 87 may come into operation if all the requirements given here are fulfilled. 88, act not intended to cause death, done by consent in good faith for benefit of person. When we give consent to our own operations, certainly there the doctor is not intending to cause death. We are not expecting to be caused death, but it may, the action has been done in good faith. It may result in the doctor rules here maybe 50-50 chance. So when you give that consent, that's the section which protects the doctors if some harm occurs. Nothing which is not intended to cause death is an offense by reason of any harm which it may cause or be intended by the doer to cause. The doctor intentionally cuts open our stomach. Be known by the doer to be likely to cause to any person for whose benefit it is done in good faith and who has given a consent, whether express or implied, to suffer that harm or to take that risk of that harm. So I give a consent to operate me for my whatever disease I have. So 88 is the one which protects the doctors. Surgeon, knowing that a particular operation is likely to cause the death of self, who suffers under a painful complaint, but not intending to cause death and intending to, in good faith, that benefit, performs the operation on set with their consent, it has committed no offense. Then there might be situations where the consent is, the action is done for the child, insane person, after obtaining the consent of the guardian. If the person is, in case of children, we're talking about 12 years. That has led to some controversy with the juvenile justice, where children below the age of 18 cannot give consent. They also cannot give consent in case of sexual offenses also. So the controversy which had arisen was that under the new law, POCSO 2012, a child cannot get a medical opinion without the consent of the parents. While in case of 89, earlier, if I suppose a girl was sexually active, she became pregnant at the age of 14, she could go herself to the doctor and get her opinion and see whatever she needs to do. But now, because of the POCSO, that agency has been taken away from her. So there has been some discussion about it, but well, that's what the provision is today. The benefit of person under 12 years of age or of unsound mind. So see here, for the purposes of these 89, the age at which the guardian consent is required is below the age of 12. While on other cases we have been saying 18, but in this case we have said 12. Above 12, a child himself can give consent. Nothing which is done in good faith for the benefit of a person under 12 years of age or of unsound mind by consent either express or implied of the guardian or other person having lawful charge of that person is an offense by reason of any harm which it may cause or be intended by the doer to cause, to be known by the doer to be likely to cause to that person, provided that this exception shall not extend to the intentional causing of death or to the attempting to cause death. Second, exception shall not extend to the doing of anything which the person doing it knows to be likely to cause death for any purpose other than preventing death or grievous hurt or curing of any grievous disease or infirmity. This exception shall not extend to the voluntary causing of grievous hurt or to the attempting to cause grievous hurt unless it be for the purpose of preventing death or grievous hurt or the curing of any grievous disease or infirmity. Fourthly, exception shall not extend to the abatement of any offense to the committing of which offense it will not extend. Then section 90 is an important definition we have. Well, constantly we're talking about without consent, with consent. So what is consent is defined in section 90. So wherever in the legislation we have used the word without consent, with consent, we have to see whether the requirement of section 90 are fulfilled. I think this is important because the meaning of this one, when you read it in context with section 375, you will find that the section has modified this definition in case of rape. And it has given a loophole. It has created a loophole in the manner in which 375 has been drafted, watering down the impact of section 90. So if the consent has been given under fear or misconception, under mistake of fact, then if the consent is given, it is not a valid consent. A consent is not such a consent as is intended by any section of this code, not only this chapter. If the consent is given by a person under fear of injury, and we need to look at, do you remember the meaning of the word injury? I think section 44 defines injury. Injury denotes any harm, whatever, illegally caused to any person in body, mind, reputation, or property. So 4 categories of harms are included in this one. The word, when it says fear of injury. So if the fear is that your nude pictures will be put on the internet unless you give 50,000 rupees. You give 50,000 rupees. Have you given it with your consent? Because you voluntarily took out the check, wrote the check and gave it to him. Is it a free consent or not a free consent? Is that a consent given under fear of injury?
Coercion.
Yeah, so coercion, fear of injury, because your reputation, because it's not only, there's no fear to your body, but the word injury says harm to your body, reputation, property, or mind. So any of the 4. So if your reputation is at stake that your nude pictures will be put out there, it's a harm, there's a fear of injury. So that is not a good consent. Or under a misconception of fact. So one is injury, the other is that a person comes to collect the money from my house and says, मुझे लाला जी ने भेजा, आपने उनको 500 रुपए देने थे, आप दे दो मुझे. तो मैंने उसको 500 रुपए दे दिए. Under the belief that he is Lala Ji's servant. Have I given the money with consent?
No, ma'am.
Misconception of fact. I thought this was such and such person, but he is presenting himself. मुझे cheating का case was, it was not given, even though there was no resistance, there was no force, but it was under misconception of fact, and therefore it is not done consent. It is not, the money has not been given with consent. So consent is very categorically, there should be no misconception and there should be no fear of injury. And if the person doing the act knows or has reason to believe that the consent was given in consequence of such fear or misconception, तो उस बंदे को पता है मैं तो लाला जी का नौकर हूं नहीं. So he knows and I do not know, my consent is of no value, I can file a case of cheating against this person. क्योंकि आपको तो मैंने कोई आपको चाकू थोड़ी दिखाया था, आपने मुझे मर्जी से 500 रुपए दिए थे. But that is not a defense which is sustainable because the money, property has not been parted with my consent. So consent is not only, absence of consent is only when I was resisting physically to somebody is trying to snatch my purse and I'm resisting. That's not the only incidence of that. There's no consent. Consent of insane person, if the consent is given by a person who, because of his unsoundness of mind or intoxication, is unable to understand the nature and consequence of that to which he gives his consent. So because of intoxication of such a nature that he does not know what he's consenting to, so a girl who is stone drunk she doesn't resist a man to have sex with her. Can she be said to have consented to that sex?
No, ma'am.
So consent has to be, the person should be aware of what you're giving consent to. Consent of a child, unless the contrary appears from the, and remember here we are not talking about forced intoxication, even if it is voluntary. But the person who is now being victimized is in such a state that she does not know what she is giving consent to. She's not even aware of what is the nature of act happening to her. Then the fact that she did not resist does not mean she had consented. It will be an offense of rape in those cases. Consent of child, unless the contrary appears from the context, if the consent is given by a person who is under 12 years of age. So there's a little confusion here because of this, because if a child of 13 runs away from home with a boyfriend, she has consented. But because the kidnapping section says no consent will be valid only until the age of 18. So to that extent, consent of a child, the 12 years condition gets modified depending on what is the offense we are talking about. So if there's a specific offense, laying down a specific age cutoff there, then that will apply. 91, and we'll be returning to 90 again, because when we look at extortion, we look at rape, and we find out that how the definition has been applied differently. The concept of consent has been applied differently. 91, exclusion of acts which are offenses independently of harm caused. The exceptions in sections 87, 88, and 89. What are these sections talking about? When a consent has been given for certain doing things for my benefit. They will not extend to acts which are offenses independently of any harm which they may cause or be intended to cause or be known to be likely to cause to the person giving the consent or on whose behalf consent is given. So causing miscarriage. It's the woman doesn't die because of the miscarriage, she gives consent. But that's a clear example where the very fact of miscarriage, giving permission to miscarriage is an offense, not by reference to what is the harm done. The action of causing abortion under IPC, we have, now IPC has to be read with the MTPA, but in IPC, giving consent to have a miscarriage is not a consent, is not a valid consent. And so there's only given one example, but in any case where the harm itself is punishable, irrespective of anything else. Therefore, in those cases, by reason of such harm, these exceptions given in those categories will not apply. Then, act done in good faith for the benefit of a person without consent. Somebody has been a road accident victim, is lying unconscious on the road, and unless immediate medical surgery, surgical intervention done, he'll die. So one can always do that also for the benefit of the person without the consent, when there's no possibility of getting consent either of the person or of the guardian of the person. So certainly in all those cases where a person is not capable of giving consent, but the action is being done in good faith for the benefit of this person, that person is also, certainly it will also not. Then communication made in good faith. No communication made in good faith is an offense by reason of any harm to the person to whom it is made, if it is made for the benefit of that person. My father was suffering from cancer, and one day he asked the doctor, tell me the truth. Will I survive this illness? And you must tell me the truth. He insisted on that. So the doctor told him the truth that no, you will not survive. And I could see suddenly his face fell, his spirit kind of went away, and he kind of felt that why I'm in this hospital, the doctors do not have any hope. It caused him a lot of mental stress, but that's protected because what the doctor was doing that, and knowing the manner in which my father asked these questions, I knew doctor must tell the truth. I knew the truth, my father did not know the truth. So certainly it was a communication made in good faith. It did cause him mental stress, but the action is protected. Act to which a person is compelled by threat. Duress, except murder and offenses committed against the state, offenses against the state punishable with death, nothing is an offense. So exceptions, two. One is the offense of murder. The other one is not all offenses against the state, but those which are punishable with death. This will not apply. In other cases, that applies. Nothing is an offense which is done by a person who is compelled to do it by threats, which at the time of doing it reasonably cause the apprehension that instant death to that person will otherwise be the consequence, provided the person doing the act did not of his own accord or from a reasonable apprehension of harm to himself, short of instant death, place himself in a situation by which he became subject to such constraint. Explanation: person who is of his own accord or by reason of a threat or being beaten joins a gang of dacoits. So we are coming to your example of drinking. Harder than that, but comparable. Knowing their character is not entitled to the benefit of the exception on the ground of his having been compelled by his associates to do anything that is an offense by law. Explanation 2. Person seized by a gang of dacoits and forced by threat of instant death to do a thing which is an offense by law. For example, a smith compelled to take his tools and to force the door of a house for the dacoit to enter and plunder, it is entitled to the benefit of this exception. So when we have Panditji being abducted to come and perform a ceremony, illegal marriage, imposing a forced marriage, so the Pandit will be protected. Act causing slight harm. When we get onto a bus, somebody treads on our toes. It's an offense of hurt. But it says nothing is an offense by reason that it causes or that is intended to cause or that it is known to be likely to cause any harm if that harm is so slight that no person of ordinary sense and temper would complain of such harm. So the example of the bus, people treading or pushing you, etc., these are simpler. The difficulty has arisen. A child of, let's say, 12 runs away with a sack of onions. This is called trivial harm. So is it a trivial harm? No action should follow, or should action follow? 1 kg bag of onion he runs away with.
What happened to that 1 kg of onion?
He sold it for some money. And remember, you also need to ask this question that whether what he did with the onions is important in determining criminal liability. That is the motive. Motive doesn't have a relevance to the culpability. Motive may have a relevance in deciding what punishment be given. For culpability, motive doesn't matter. He might have run away with what do you call that? A packet of bread. Maybe he's hungry. A man enters into a medical shop and runs away with the injection his wife needs desperately and he doesn't have the money to buy. The motive doesn't have. If he has moved the property without nothing, it is certainly an offense. But the question is that is it a trivial nature that nobody will complain? We have come across many cases where the shopkeeper have complained. Even they have run away with 2 mangoes, 1 sack of onion. So the police complaints have been made, the children have been brought before the JJPs and inquiries have been held against them. So certainly but the principle is clear that if you can prove it is true trivial, nobody would have complained. This man is complaining, it is his problem. Then you can get your client out of the criminal liability if you are able to prove your case is covered under 95. From 96 to 106 are the sections which are dealing with private defense. And this is the area we are going to focus with the help of the case law. The first 96 is just a declaration. Nothing is an offense which is done in exercise of the right of private defense. Now, what does private defense, what does the word mean? Look at the subsequent sections. You will find that it is defending your own body, your own property, body of any other person, property of any other person. These are the 4 areas of operation: your own body and property, the body and property of somebody else, not necessarily known to you, related to you, that's not required at all. If you find someone is beating a man on the road, you can protect this man who is getting beaten from the assailant. And in that order, saving this man, if you cause any harm to the other person, it is not an offense, because you are exercising the right of private defense, saving the life or body of this other person. And this right is available not only when you are under threat of death, it is available against any small injury also, any kind of injury. So 97 tells us
what there is also a conception of the proportion in which the harm is done to the other person. I mean, if a person like threatened,
we will read. Nirupam will read other sections where we find all these provisions laid down. What are the circumstances in which the right is available? Just 1 second. पता नहीं. So we will look at the other sections. We'll read through the other sections for us to know when this right start, what is the extent of the right, in what circumstances you can exercise, what circumstances you cannot exercise. What is, so when does it right begin, when does it end? All these are given in these sections. Extent of harm which can be caused, when you look at very quickly, section 100. Section 100 tells you the circumstances, 7 circumstances in which the harm you can cause intentionally is death. You can actually kill another person if the circumstances are these 7. In case of personal, the harm to the body, your own or somebody else's. And in case of property, section 103 tells us the circumstances in which, in order to protect your property or somebody else's property, you can again cause death. So section 100 and 103 permit you that in these circumstances, the death can be caused if required. If required. It's not that you must kill, but you may, even if you kill, you will still not be liable for anything, any criminal liability. That's a huge difference between what we're talking about, exceeding the right of private defense. If you do not fall here, but you are still doing private defense, using more force, the circumstances were not those listed in either under section 100 or section 103. Death still happened. So that will be an instance of exceeding the right of private defense. Then the offense will be culpable homicide. But if you're still within the language of section 100 or 103, even when you kill another person, there is no liability, I'm saying, emphasizing on that aspect. So certainly let's look at 97. Right of private defense of body and property. Every person has a right. Why don't you read? I've been speaking too long. You read.
Ma'am, I'll read.
Okay.
Every person has a right, subject to the restrictions contained in Section 99, to defend first his own body and the body of any other person against any offense affecting the human body. Secondly, the property, whether movable or immovable, of himself or of any other person against any act which is an offense falling under the definition of theft, robbery, mischief, or criminal trespass, or which is an attempt to commit theft, robbery, mischief, or criminal trespass.
So what we are saying is, in case of human body, any offense against human body, hurt, grievous hurt, up to murder, you are entitled to rape. Everything is covered, gives you a right to private defense. The whole range. When you say hurt, just somebody gives you a slap, is about to give you a slap, you can exercise the right of private defense. You can hold his hand, you can give him a slap back, you can push him back, he falls down. You are exercising a right of private defense of body, because it is any offense against the body, human body. And there's a whole chapter which says offenses against human body. Section.
Ma'am, may I ask a question?
Chapter 16 start with section 299. So that whole chapter from 299 to 3rd, sexual assault. The whole of chapter 16 we're talking about. Okay, so when we are talking about firstly, that's the chapter we'll look at. For property, there are 4 categories of offense listed: theft, robbery, mischief, or criminal trespass, or attempt to commit any of these 4. So these are the offenses against which right of private defense is available. Then 98. Who had the question?
Yes, ma'am. So the question was in section 90 about consent. It talks about injury to the person, but it does not talk about injury to person who's associated to them, as in a relative or someone who they have interest in. So can a consent be taken
when you will read the definition of extortion, it says to you or any other person. So there, if the money, property has been extorted from you by putting you or any other person under fear of injury, then you're entitled. Then this is not a valid consent.
So ma'am, does that apply?
Yeah.
Does that apply only to monetary considerations or consent of any sort?
Injury, na? Injury is taking for all the 4. It
Okay,
may be
yes,
that
ma'am.
you have, injury, including all the 4. It may be money, it may be a favor, it may be, transfer my property. It may be anything.
Yes, ma'am, got it. Thank you.
Then 98. Somebody please read.
May I?
Yes, Debakar?
98, section 98, right of private defense against the act of a person of unsound mind, etc. When an act which would otherwise be a certain offense is not that offense by reason of the youth and the want of maturity of understanding, the unsoundness of mind, or the intoxication of the person doing that act, or by reason of any misconception on the part of that person, every person has the same right of private defense against that act which he would have if the act were that offense.
So suppose a boy of 6 years old picks up a gun, his father's service revolver, and is ready to aim at you. For him, it's a child's play. He doesn't realize that you will die. You have a right to private defense. You can take necessary action to prevent the child from affecting you. If you need to shoot the child down, you can do that. That is the important. If the person, the insane person, the accused person under section 84 may not be liable for any offense if he shoots you down. So he can, because he will not be liable if he shoots you down, but you are under fear. You have a reasonable apprehension that you will be killed. So this insane person is playing with the gun and he's shooting at you, not knowing what he's doing. So if he was to shoot me down, he will not be liable. But I will be killed already. The law says no, you can still, even though he is not liable for the offense because of intoxication, because of the age, etc., you are still entitled to exercise of right. So that's the import of 98. Illustrations can be read.
Illustration A. Jade, under the influence of madness, attempts to kill A. Jade is guilty of no offense, but A has the same right of private defense which he would have if Jade were sane.
This is what we just said. B.
A enters by night a house which he is legally entitled to enter Jade in good faith, taking A for a housebreaker, attacks A. Here Jade, by attacking A under this misconception, commits no offense, but A has the same right of private defense against Jade, which he would have if Jade were not acting under that misconception.
Okay, so that's clear. Then an important one comes in. The circumstances against which no right of private defense exists. Section 99. So it's a similar pattern when we had said in case of grave and sudden provocation, there were provisos. That in these circumstances, grave and sudden provocation will not be justifiable. Here also, we have again certain examples. So somebody else, please read. Vanya.
Section 97 or 99?
Rishabh, 99. Rishabh. Rishabh, read section 99. Okay, you are having difficulty. So Ankit, Rishabh, you can mute yourself. Ankit.
I don't have the book with me right now.
And why so?
Ma'am, because I'm not at my home.
So what? You have your internet connection with you, or you don't have internet connection? Download and read. Balram?
Ma'am, am I audible now?
Yes, Rishabh. Go ahead.
Section 99. Acts against which there is no right of private defense. There is no right of private defense against an act which does not reasonably cause the apprehension of death or of grievous hurt, if done or attempted to be done by a public servant acting in good faith under color of his office, though that act may not be strictly justifiable by law.
So we had seen earlier, act by the public servants. So if they cause death, they would be liable to, under mistake of, after due care, if they cause certain harm, they can still be protected in the exceptions to that. But just because they are entitled to that one, so unless the harm is of death or, what was this? Death or grievous hurt. So if the policeman comes, and he's taking to, he's going to arrest you because he believes you are Mr. C, but you are actually Mr. B. Can you take action in private defense, resist his arrest?
No, ma'am.
What about the cases of
No, ma'am.
Because the fear is that there might be confinement, but there is no fear of death or grievous hurt. You cannot resist. You can always file a case or whatever later on, but at that point of time, you cannot physically beat up this policeman who, under misconception of fact, is taking you. And certainly, if he has his warrant, certainly there's no right of private defense. There's no right of private. There's no further. Though the act may not be strictly justifiable by law. So suppose he has come to arrest you without an arrest warrant. Usually arrest cannot happen without arrest warrant. Then can you act in private defense?
I think no, because the apprehension should be of death or either of grievous hurt.
Right. If suppose the cops are now preparing for fake encounter,
Definitely you can exercise your right of private
Definitely.
defense.
Because then the apprehension is of death or grievous hurt. Be very clear. Second part, the second para.
There is no right of private defense against an act which does not reasonably cause the death or serious hurt if done or attempted to be done by the direction of public servant acting in good faith under color of his office, though that direction may not be strictly justifiable by law.
So if the senior police officer has ordered a lathi charge on a non-violent mob, can you then beat up the policeman who is doing lathi charge?
No, ma'am.
So the apprehension, if there is a firing suppose happening, which is illegally done, it, the policemen start firing at you without a direction from the boss. Certainly, you have a right of private defense. Further,
Ma'am, I had a doubt.
yes.
Ma'am, so in case that there is a fake encounter happening, then let's say it's not even a fake encounter. There, people were going in the police van, and the police started hurting the inmate grievously. So if the inmate fights back and say runs away, then he can claim the right of private defense against that particular incident.
Ayush, there are two levels of things involved. One is what is the legal provision. The second one is how do you prove it. So
Yes,
whether so the question of proof is a different question. Then assume what we are talking about is that suppose this is the true situation and we're able to prove it. So our examples are coming from that scenario. And most of the student scenario comes in that how does this man know? He will always claim that there was a fake encounter, therefore I killed.
yes, ma'am.
So,
Ma'am, so I
so
was
that's
also asking in
that's
a
a
strictly statutory perspective. With the strict statutory perspective, he can claim that. Whatever the proof will happen is a different thing altogether.
yeah, because if he's able to prove it that yes, it was a fake encounter, they were about to kill me and I killed him down. If he proves it, he will get his defense.
Understood,
But
ma'am. Thank you.
so this happened many a times because people come to us for advice. So we tell them that no, legal position ये है. अब आपको फैक्ट को तोड़ मरोड़ के आप क्या एविडेंस ला सकते हो, आपके पास क्या डॉक्यूमेंट्स हैं, नहीं है, आई विटनेस है, नहीं है, these are all separate questions. So if what you're telling us is the true facts and you can prove it, this will be the consequence. So that's how we study. And then the further, because we said in the very beginning that this is only one of the legislations which operate in getting a person convicted or acquitted. The other two are equally important, the CRPC as well as Evidence Act. So the question of, it may be that no, you are arrested in one place, which is not the right place. You should have been arrested. You are not produced within 24 hours. So there might be lots of technical reasons because of which some consequences may occur. The evidence which you are producing is not admissible because it is not proved to be authentic. You would think this document is sufficient, but may not be sufficient. At some stage, we had to prove the age of a person. And we were producing the school register. So then the judge asked us whether school registers are documents which the court can take cognizance of as binding. Then we had to look at the laws and found that school registers are maintained as a practice, but they're not mandated by law under the Education Act. So because there are certain things which the court has to take cognizance if they are asked by the statute. So suppose your voter list, for example, your voter list names exist, the court will take it as a proved category that you are a voter living at such and such address. Because that is a requirement of the statute. So there will be lots of questions are there, and ultimately what will happen in the case is dependent not only on what the law says, but also what facts have been proved in the case. So again, saying the same thing that we are talking of when we give instances, we say these are the facts which are proved. If these are proved, then this will be the consequence. But whether they are proved or not, whether they are capable to be proved or not, are different questions, but very important questions for actual litigation. Okay, further, please read. With the third circumstance, not available private defense.
There is no right of private defense in cases in which there is time to have recourse to the protection of the public authorities.
Somebody comes and tells you that tomorrow morning I'm going to come and kill you. You cannot then prepare कि ठीक है मैं gun लेके बैठता हूँ and I'll shoot him if he comes tomorrow with a gun to kill me, because you had the time to take recourse to. But suppose you're in such a remote place, walking itself will take you 4 days. You know, I've been to Leh areas where for 4 hours in the car there was nothing available except that village. So whether that village has a chowki or not, there is no wireless available, there are no communication mechanisms available. You can prepare for the whole night and wait for the enemy to come tomorrow. But if you had occasion to take recourse to, then you cannot exercise the private defense. And this was the example we are talking about when we talk about Ranjita Ruvalia, that she had been complaining to the police, but nothing happened. She was not protected. She constantly felt that she was under fear. So, but the law does not take cognizance of those scenarios where people have taken recourse to the public authority and nothing happens. In a lot of our films, we find that the hero then takes the gun, because the politician, the policeman, and the neta, the three goons, they will all join up together and no justice is being done. Then the hero turns villain, then tries to kill everybody who has wronged him. He's not acting in private defense. He cannot take the exception that, oh, I was acting in private defense because my report to the police station has not led to anything. So certainly one has to be clear that there should be no time to take recourse to the public authorities. And then the second part of Section 99, very important one, extent to which the right may be executed, may be exercised. So Ayush, please read.
Extent to which right may be exercised. The right of private defense in no case extends to the inflicting of more harm than it is necessary to inflict for the purpose of defense.
The important point is purpose of defense. So if somebody has attacked you, you cannot say, okay, how dare he touch me? I'm going to now kill him. It was not necessary. Then it becomes an offense. It is no more a defense. So the action to the extent required for defending yourself is only justified. Explanation 1. Ayush?
Explanation 1. A person is not deprived of the right of private defense against an act done or attempted to be done by a public servant as such, unless he knows or has reason to believe that the person doing the act is such public servant.
So somebody comes in a mufti, not wearing a uniform, and he wants to take you away. You do not know he's a public servant. He's not showing an identity card. You have the same rights. So when first we said that if it's a public servant discharging his duties, though misconception, maybe little more than what he was entitled to. But if you do not know this is a public servant, you can still exercise your right. Explanation 2.
Explanation 2. A person is not deprived of the right of private defense against an act done or attempted to be done by the direction of a public servant unless he knows or has reason to believe that the person doing the act is acting by such direction, or unless such person states the authority under which he acts, or if he has authority in writing, unless he produces such authority if demanded.
Yeah. So, direction of a public servant. He says, I am the, what do you call them? Home guard. And I have been authorized by such and such person, by the SHO who has given this duty to me. Or somebody says, no. So we are saying either the first one explanation was the public servant himself or herself. And this is saying direction of a public servant. So unless he knows, or we said, I card dikhao. If it doesn't show an I card, it doesn't show the authority letter, you still have the right of private defense. So only if you know that these are people who are acting under the color of their office or in the direction of the officer with the who has the charge, the right is still available. But if you know that this is a police officer, though in a mufti, then you cannot say, oh, he was not wearing uniform, therefore he was not on duty. That's not an argument you can take. Then we need to look at now the very important section of Section 100. So this extent is laying down proportionality. How do you determine proportionality? We'll have those kind of examples from our case law. Here we are only learning the legal provisions. Then we will see the actual situations in different cases, how the law has been applied in those circumstances. So Section 100. is a section which tells you in which cases, in order to defend yourself, you can cause death. Right to private defense of the body extends under the restrictions mentioned in the last preceding section. So this is we're reading 99 restrictions into section 100. So if it's a public servant, then you cannot cause, so all those are to be read. And also proportionality principle still applies. So even though you can cause death, it is not that in all cases you are justified to cause death. But even if you cause death, you are still justified. To the voluntary causing of death or of any other harm to the assailant, if the offense which occasions the exercise of the right be of any of the descriptions hereinafter enumerated. So that if any of the 7 conditions exist, you have the right to the extent of causing death if necessary by proportionality. So first of all, it says such an assault. So we need to know what is an assault. Do you have any sense of what is assault? What is your common understanding of assault? Assault.
No, assault is like a battery going and beating up a person.
We have a section 351, which defines
Physical harm, ma'am.
And no. That's what the misconception is. Assault, we always think somebody has, suppose, hit me, has given me a slap. Then we think it is assault. But assault happens at a stage before that. As long as somebody raises his hand to hit me, and I apprehend that now I'm going to get hit, assault has already happened. He does not need to hit me actually in order to commit the offense of assault. That's the distinction between the legal definition of assault and what we generally understand. Shows you slap intentionally. When he hit, it becomes battery. Battery is not the word we use in our criminal law. It is an English term. IPC does not use the word battery. So if somebody actually hits you, it's the offense of hurt. And for understanding assault, we will go back to read 349 and 50 also, because these are the words which have been used in assault. But let's first read 351. So Muskan, can you read?
Ma'am, the purpose of private defense is basically based on the apprehension, right? Because even if the injury is not caused, उसका वेट थोड़ी करेगा मैम इंसान मारने का, तो he has to exercise.
Actual injury होनी जरूरी नहीं है. Actual injury begin भी होनी जरूरी नहीं है. But you're just apprehending कि ये हो सकता है reasonably. Somebody entering my bedroom at night, possibly. What are the possible apprehensions? He might kill me, he might rape me, he might commit dacoity in my house. It's a single person, not dacoity, but robbery can happen. So if there's he's still not done anything, he's just entering through a window, he's also forced open the door and entered my house. So what is a reasonable apprehension? He doesn't have to do anything as yet. Or if suppose there are riots happening in the city, and I know that I am a minority community person, my shop in the market has already been burnt down by the rioters, and now a mob is coming towards my house. Do I have to wait till they actually attack my house? Or can I take action before that? I can take action before the actual hitting happens into my house. Because now there is a reasonable apprehension in the circumstances that now I will be the next target. So I can fire at the mob because there is an apprehension as listed in one of these 7 clauses. Apprehension, not actual harm. And that's what has been explained in some of the cases as well. So
I have one more doubt, ma'am.
Yes, Shakir.
Ma'am, we've seen in private defense, ma'am, the rationale is that state has to provide the protection, and if state is unable to provide the protection, you can exercise your right to private defense. Ma'am, अगर जैसा आपने rights की बात बताई, if rights are happening and you have a police station just like a few meters away, तो ma'am उस case में you need to take the recourse of the this police station, or you can exercise.
Suppose you have made a phone call to the police station that I am I have information, my neighbors 4 lanes ahead have said that there's a mob coming towards my house. They're taking my name, they're shouting my name. My shop in the market has already been gutted down. You made that phone call. Now, police may take 10 minutes, but the mob is in your house in 5 minutes. You can still take action. You don't have to wait then, police if the police has not reached on time, you can take your action. But when the police comes in, then it is the police job. If the police is not doing anything and you have the apprehension of death, you still have your right. So, and certainly attack the attacker, not the police. Because police not doing so, police को नहीं मार सकते. But we can still attack the attacker because the police is not, suppose police is not being effective because the number is so big of the Reuters than the 5 policemen who were posted in my house. So then it is also saying that no, the course is not possible because these policemen are not able to repel, or if they've not reached the place. So either way, so you have to look at all the circumstances, and we will see that in our Martin's case, we have those kind of examples as to whether they had a right of private defense or whether they had exceeded the right of private defense. So assault, whoever makes any gesture or any preparation intending or knowing it to be likely that such gesture or preparation will cause any person present to apprehend that he who makes that gesture or preparation is about to use criminal force to that person is said to commit an assault. So no actual hitting is required for the offense of assault. Explanation: mere words do not amount to an assault, but the words which a person uses may give to his gestures or preparation such a meaning as may make these gestures or preparation amount to an assault. मैं तुझे जान से मार दूंगा. Suppose somebody is shouting. That itself is not assault. But with that gesture, he then tries to reach out through his pocket and you apprehend a gun in there. Assault has happened because his preparation to now do the actual firing is causing apprehension that assault, that criminal force will be used. So criminal force is defined in 350. First, we need to look at what is force. And it's very interesting to read this definition. I had asked Muskan to read. Muskan, are you able to? Okay, Mayank.
Ma'am, section 350 criminal force. Whoever intentionally uses force to...
First read 349.
Ma'am, 349. Section 349, force. A person is said to use force to another if he causes motion, change of motion, or cessation of motion to the other, or if he causes to any substance such motion or change of motion, a cessation of motion as brings that substance into contact with any part of that other's body or with anything which the other is wearing or carrying, or with anything so situated that such contact affects the other's sense of feeling, provided that the person causing the motion or change of motion or cessation of motion causes that motion, change of motion, or cessation of motion in one of the 3 ways hereinafter described. First, by his own bodily power. Secondly, by disposing any substance in such a manner that the motion or change of cessation of motion takes place without any further act on his part or on the part of any other person. Thirdly, by including any animal to move, inducing any animal to move, to change its motion, or to cease to move.
So if I tell to my dog, shoo, and it runs after the person to whom I pointed out shoe. That other person starts running. Have I used force?
Yes, ma'am.
If I give a chabuk to the bull, to the ox who is driving a cart, and it starts moving fast with the man on it, have I used force?
Yes, ma'am.
I throw very hot water on a person and this person starts running.
Yes, ma'am.
If I throw a ball at him and it touches his bag, and apprehending now cricket ball in my hand, that next will be the cricket ball. First was the softer ball. He starts running. Have I used force?
You are.
So if I anything which touches the body or the person who is wearing or carrying any of that, if I touch it by one own bodily power, disposing substance, inducing an animal, any of these three. So I don't have to physically. If I untie a dog and let him run towards without even saying show, I've used force. If I show, so that anything which is so situated that such contact affects the other sense of feeling. So only that much is required for us to say this is force. Criminal force, whoever intentionally uses force to any person without that person's consent in order to the committing of any offense, or intending by the use of such force to cause or knowing to be likely that by such use of force he will cause injury, fear, or annoyance to the person to whom the force is used is said to use criminal force. So if I when हम लोग वो खेलते थे, तो नाम ही भूल गया गेम का, बॉल लेके दूसरों को मारते थे. You have to run away when the ball is coming to hit you. So that's with consent, not an offense. But if the action is being done in order to commit any offense, or that it is cause injury, fear, or annoyance, then I am using criminal force. So coming back to the definition of assault, whoever makes any gesture, preparation, intending to, or likely that by such gesture, preparation, I will cause the person to apprehend that this other person is about to use criminal force against me, is said to commit assault. So returning to section 100, you have to read all these sections when you are on the first word, which says such an assault. So we are not talking about actual harm being caused, have already been beginning of the harm being caused, not required, just an assault. If criminal force is about to be used, if there is an apprehension that criminal force is about to be used, assault has happened. Such an assault as may reasonably cause the apprehension that death will otherwise be the consequence of such assault. It may not amount to murder, but death and murder are two different things. But if I know that it is likely to cause my death, I have a right to cause such bodily injury as may extend to causing the death of the aggressor. So death is one instance. Second one is grievous hurt. Grievous hurt is defined in section 320. Third is rape. Fourth is gratifying unnatural lust. Fifth is intention of kidnapping or abduction. Sixth, wrongfully confining a person under circumstances where there is no possibility of taking recourse to public authority. Seventh, an act, this is a new addition which has been done in 2013, an act or throwing or act of throwing or administering acid or attempt to do any of this, which may reasonably cause the apprehension that grievous hurt will occur with the consequence. We will have to mug up these 7 circumstances. If these are the circumstances, only then we will say whether causing death was justified or not. In all other circumstances, you can still use force, but if not this, then you cannot cause death. If you cause death in other circumstances, when none of these 7 conditions were there, then it will be attracting exception to section 300, when it says I think secondly was the, I forget now, thirdly, I think thirdly was the exception. Let's just check, which says exceeding the right to private defense. So when the circumstances of private defense were there, but you were not entitled to cause death, you could not have caused death in those circumstances. If the apprehension was, say, hurt, he was going to beat me up. No, he has already given me 5 slaps, but he's going to now mercilessly still beat me up. I cannot kill that person. But if I know that he's got a bat and he will break my bones, I can cause his death. So there's a distinction that if it is a question of if one has caused death in circumstances other than those given in section 100 or section 103, then it may be a case of exceeding right of private defense. But it must be, the harm must have been caused while the harm existed. 101 says when it stopped, what is other harms can be given. 102, commencement, right of private defense commences as soon as reasonable apprehension of danger to the body arises from an attempt or threat to commit the offense, though the offense may not have been committed, and it continues as long as apprehension of danger to the body continues. So this is important to remember, and that's where the distinction lies, that if the apprehension is gone, the fellow who was aggressor, when you gave him a blow, he ran away. And you still pursued him, followed him and then killed him. You are not exercising your right of private defense, then you are becoming offensive. It will not fall under the exception 4, exception 3 of 300. We'll continue with this tomorrow. And tomorrow, please read the cases. The first case which was supposed to be today, but we didn't do, is Ram Swarup. And there are 2 other cases we should be taking tomorrow. We've got 3 more listed, but we'll see whether we can cover all the 4. Ram Swarup, Devanarayan, Kishan, and James Martin. There are the 4 more cases which we should be covering tomorrow. If you come prepared, then it will be easier to do it. Otherwise, I'll be telling you what is already there. But I think it's important to understand the right arises with the apprehension, ceases when the apprehension goes. But sometime on the passion, on the spur of the moment, people still chase the thief and beat him up. That is not permissible. If catching the thief and then beating him up. I'll be exercising. Suppose we found a thief entering our house, and the moment he saw that we have woken up, he ran away, leaving the property behind. We ran after him, caught him, and then beat him up. Whether the injury caused to him is part of private defense?
No, ma'am.
Yeah, because at that point in time, he was not posing any danger. But if you had to beat him up in order to get back your money, then it may be private defense. But if he's trying to take away your property and then you beat him up to regain your property, at that point you can do that. But if he has already run away with the property, you saw him tomorrow, you can't do anything. Directly, it's not a right of private defense. So we'll continue with this discussion tomorrow. And so see you tomorrow. All questions hold for tomorrow. We're already at 3:55. You might have another class.
Thank you, ma'am.
So write down all your questions if you have any clarifications. But we will now try to apply the sections we have read from the cases which are prescribed. And I'll suggest that please at home read the remaining sections till 106. So we have read the sections for the defense of body. The subsequent sections deal with defense of property. So there also, they have listed out the offenses against which this is available. And in some cases to the extent of death, but otherwise lesser harm than death. So, okay. Good day.